Everything around the Pittsburgh Steelers right now points to a very deliberate reshaping of this team, and it starts with how Mike McCarthy is building his coaching staff. This is not about splashy headlines or trying to win a news cycle for a day. This is about structure, trust, and putting people in place who can carry real responsibility inside the building. The hiring of Brian Angelico as offensive coordinator tells you a lot about where this offense is headed and how McCarthy wants it to function on a daily basis. Angelico arrives from Minnesota, where he spent 4 years as Kevin O'Connell's right-hand man in the passing game. And the important detail here is that he reportedly turned down significant money to stay with the Vikings in order to come to Pittsburgh. That alone speaks volumes about how he views this opportunity and how attractive this situation is under McCarthy. There's been a lot of talk from fans wondering how much this hire really matters if Mike McCarthy is calling the plays on Sundays. And that's a fair question, but it also misses the bigger picture. The offensive coordinator role in today's NFL is about far more than holding a play sheet on game day. Angelico is being brought in to install the offense during the offseason and to run offensive meetings when McCarthy is pulled in 100 different directions as head coach and to be deeply involved in weekly game planning. In Minnesota, he helped O'Connell prepare opponents, identify tendencies, and structure game plans. And he was apparently so valuable in that role that the Vikings made a strong push to keep him. That matters. It means Pittsburgh is getting someone who has already been trusted at a high level, even if this is his first official opportunity as an offensive coordinator in his 14-year NFL career. Another key part of Angelico's job will be his vantage point on game days. With McCarthy on the sideline, Angelico is expected to work from the coach's box, giving him a bird's-eye view of how defenses are adjusting. That perspective allows him to identify coverage trends, defensive weaknesses, and subtle shifts that are much harder to see from field level. Those insights can then be communicated to McCarthy in real time. This is how modern staffs operate, and it's one of the ways offenses stay ahead as games unfold. On top of that, Angelico will be coordinating personnel groupings and making sure position coaches have their players ready when McCarthy wants specific looks on the field. There's also the tight ends room, which Angelico will coach directly. That's not a small detail. Tight ends are a major part of McCarthy's offense, both in the passing game and in how formations are dressed up to disguise intent. What stands out about Angelico's background is not that he runs exotic concepts nobody has ever seen, but that he understands how to dress up familiar ideas. Around the league, most teams are running variations of the same core passing concepts. What separates good offenses from great ones is how those concepts are presented, how motion is used, and how players are moved around to stress defenses. In Minnesota, Angelico was part of an offensive staff that consistently found creative ways to deploy talent, and that influence is expected to modernize the Steelers' offense heading into the 2026 season. On the defensive side of the ball, McCarthy has been just as intentional. Joe Witt Jr. comes in as the new secondaries coach and assistant head coach, and this is a move rooted in familiarity and proven development. Witt has a long history with McCarthy, going back to Green Bay and later Dallas, and he has built a reputation as a coach who gets production out of defensive backs, particularly in terms of creating turnovers. Players like Trevon Diggs and Darren Bland thrived under his guidance, becoming aggressive ball hawks. Now Witt gets to work with Joey Porter Jr., a corner with rare length and physical traits that fit exactly what Patrick Graham looks for when he wants to play man coverage. Witt's role goes beyond technique. He brings presence, authority, and leadership, which is why the assistant head coach title matters. He's someone who can command a room and help reinforce standards across the defense. He'll also be working closely with Jason Simmons, who has experience with Patrick Graham from Las Vegas, creating continuity and alignment within the defensive staff. Along the front, DeMonte Kazi takes over as defensive line coach, bringing credibility as a former NFL defensive lineman, while CJRU arrives from Texas Tech as the new outside linebackers coach after helping develop David Bailey into a top prospect. Sean Howe is expected to serve as assistant outside linebackers coach, adding another developmental piece to that group. There's also the possibility of more familiar faces returning. Joey Porter Sr. has openly expressed interest in coming back to the Steelers coaching staff, emphasizing the value of having former Steelers in the building to show younger players what the standard looks like. Porter has previous coaching experience under Mike Tomlin and understands the culture in Pittsburgh. Even if the outside linebackers roles are filled, there are other ways he could contribute, whether as a senior defensive assistant or in another capacity that reinforces identity and accountability. All of this ties into broader roster questions that are already being discussed. One name that continues to surface is Trevon Diggs, now a free agent. Diggs fits the physical profile Patrick Graham prefers, with size, length, and experience in man coverage, and he has a prior relationship relationship with Joe Witt Jr., that connection alone makes the idea worth discussing. At the same time, there are legitimate concerns. Diggs has not made a Pro Bowl since 2022 and has developed a reputation as an ultra-aggressive corner who can be vulnerable to double moves. His interception hunting has led to big plays in both directions, and injuries have raised questions about whether he's still the same athlete he was earlier in his career. It's a move that would come with upside and risk, and it's far from a slam dunk. Then there's the Aaron Rodgers conversation, which refuses to go away, especially during Super Bowl week. Rumors have resurfaced linking Rodgers to the Minnesota Vikings and a potential reunion with Kevin O'Connell. On paper, it makes for an easy storyline, but when you dig into it, the logic starts to thin out. Rodgers has already gone through the process of starting over once in Pittsburgh. He's built relationships, found comfort in McCarthy's offense, and helped lead the Steelers to the playoffs. Continuity matters to him, and the idea of uprooting again for a single season doesn't align with how he's spoken about the importance of stability. While Minnesota's weapons may look stronger at the moment, Pittsburgh has the cap space and draft capital to address its receiver room quickly, potentially transforming the offense around Rodgers in year 2. From the coaching staff to potential roster moves, everything points to a Steelers organization that is methodically laying a foundation rather than chasing headlines. Each decision connects to the next, and each hire reflects trust, familiarity, and a clear vision for how this team wants to operate. The question now is how all of these pieces come together once the season approaches, and whether this approach is enough to push Pittsburgh closer to true contention. What do you think about the direction Mike McCarthy is taking with this coaching staff and the potential ripple effects on the roster? If you zoom out and really connect all these dots, what you see forming in Pittsburgh is not a random collection of hires or rumors, but a very intentional ecosystem. Mike McCarthy is surrounding himself with people he trusts, people who understand his offensive philosophy, his standards for preparation, and his expectations for accountability. Brian Angelico is not here to be a placeholder. He's here to be a daily driver of the offense, someone who can modernize the structure without ripping out what already works. That balance matters, especially for a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, whose success has always been tied to timing, rhythm, and comfort within a system. Angelico's experience dressing up familiar concepts, using motion, manipulating alignments, and stressing defenses horizontally and vertically is exactly the kind of subtle evolution this offense needs rather than a total overhaul. On defense, the same theme keeps repeating. Patrick Graham wants length, discipline, and versatility. Joe Witt Jr. fits perfectly into that vision, not just because of his resume, but because of how he teaches the position. His track record shows a clear emphasis on instincts and ball skills, but also on understanding leverage and route concepts. That's where the discussion around Trevon Diggs becomes so interesting. Diggs is the definition of a high-variance player. At his best, he can flip a game with one read and one jump on the ball. At his worst, he can gamble himself out of position and give up explosive plays in a system that values discipline and communication. The question isn't just whether Diggs has talent, but whether he's willing to adapt his game at this stage of his career. The presence of Witt Jr. could theoretically help rein that in, but it's far from a guarantee. That's why this conversation isn't about whether Diggs is a big name, but whether he truly fits what this defense is trying to become. The same level of scrutiny applies to every potential move this offseason. McCarthy isn't chasing nostalgia for its own sake, but he also isn't ignoring the value of familiarity. That's why the idea of Joey Porter Sr. returning to the building resonates with so many people. It's not about sentimentality, it's about having voices in the room who understand what winning looks like in Pittsburgh, who can bridge generations and who can reinforce expectations without needing an adjustment period. Younger players respond to authenticity, and few people embody the Steelers' defensive identity more than Porter. Even in a limited or undefined role, that presence can matter more than fans sometimes realize. And then there's Rodgers, the gravitational center of all of this. Every rumor, every hypothetical, eventually circles back to him. The Vikings chatter makes for easy headlines, but when you look at Rodgers' own words and actions, the logic of him staying in Pittsburgh becomes much stronger. He has continuity with McCarthy, comfort in the offensive language, and relationships that are already established. He finished last season building chemistry with Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington, and the expectation internally is that the wide receiver room will not look the same next year. With available cap space and draft capital, that weakness is one of the most fixable issues on the roster. Rodgers understands that. He also understands that legacy is shaped by how chapters end, not just how they begin. One more year in a system that fits him, with a coaching staff built around maximizing his strengths, makes far more sense than starting from scratch again. What makes this moment fascinating for Steelers fans is that nothing feels rushed. There's patience, but there's also urgency. The staff is being assembled with precision. The roster questions are being evaluated through a clear philosophical lens. This isn't about copying what other teams are doing or chasing trends blindly. It's about adapting within an identity. That's something Pittsburgh has always valued, and for the first time in a while, you can see how the coaching hires, the scheme preferences, and the player evaluations all align toward the same goal. One thing that keeps standing out as this picture becomes clearer is how interconnected every decision is. Nothing exists in isolation. Brian Angelico isn't just an offensive coordinator hire, he's a signal that Mike McCarthy wants someone who can translate vision into daily execution. Joe Witt Jr. isn't just a secondary coach, he's a tone setter who reinforces how this defense is supposed to think and react. Even the names being floated in rumors follow that same logic. Familiarity, fit, and function all matter more than star power alone. That's a shift Steelers fans should pay attention to because it tells you the front office and coaching staff are prioritizing sustainability, not short-term buzz. Take the offense as an example. With McCarthy calling plays, the danger would be stagnation, running an offense that feels predictable or dated. Angelico's presence is meant to guard against that. His background in Minnesota shows a clear emphasis on adapting week to week, on tailoring concepts to personnel, and on forcing defenses to declare intentions early through motion and alignment. That's not something that always shows up in box scores, but it absolutely shows up in efficiency and consistency over a season. For a veteran quarterback, especially one like Aaron Rodgers who thrives on pre-snap information, that kind of structure is invaluable. It's also something that helps younger players develop faster because the offense gives them clearer answers instead of asking them to win purely on talent. Defensively, Patrick Graham's influence is becoming more visible with every hire. Length on the outside, versatility in coverage, and coaches who emphasize technique and awareness. That's why the Diggs conversation remains complicated. On paper, he checks boxes. In practice, he challenges the very principles this defense wants to lean on. Aggression is welcomed, but recklessness isn't. If the Steelers pursue him, it won't be because of his name or his past accolades, but because they believe their coaching infrastructure can refine his approach. If they don't, it will be because they decide the risk outweighs the potential reward. Either way, it's a calculated decision, not an impulsive one. The same patience applies to how the organization is handling Rodgers. There's no panic, no public pressure campaign, no rush to force a narrative that tells you both sides understand the situation clearly. If Rodgers returns, it will be because he believes this environment gives him the best chance to compete and finish strong. If he doesn't, the Steelers will already have a framework in place to pivot without tearing everything down. That's the benefit of building a staff and system first instead of chasing solutions player by player. For fans, this can be a frustrating time because there aren't always definitive answers right away, but it's also an encouraging one because the logic behind the moves is easy to follow once you step back and look at the whole picture. This is an organization trying to align philosophy, coaching, and roster construction under one coherent plan. Whether that plan ultimately leads to a deep playoff run will depend on execution, health, and a few key